As a kid, one of my favorite shows to watch in the mornings before school was Garfield and Friends, and I'm so happy that Verve is now offering Garfield and Friends to stream, as well as other cartoons and anime from our childhoods. vrv.co/geekdom. Try it for 30 days for free. The link will be in the description. Try it out. Well, it's here. After a long wait, Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, directed by J.J. Abrams, once again returning from The Force Awakens, also written by him and by Chris Terrio, the writer of Batman v Superman, which already has some people spooked, before the movie even came out. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about Star Wars Episode 9, the conclusion of the Skywalker saga, something that they definitely tried to do. Now, again, before I go any further, this is going to be a non-spoiler review for the movie, because not everybody's had a chance to go see it yet, and even though I have been covering leaks and spoilers on the channel, not everyone has watched those videos, so I want to be respectful to everyone who has not seen it. And for those of you out there who have not seen it, I'm going to give you my thoughts in this video without ruining the movie for you. Even though, as I'm sure many of you are aware, there have been tons of leaks that are accurate. Now there's video footage popping up online on social media. So whenever a big movie like this comes out, whether it be Star Wars or Marvel or whatever, you got to remember to be real careful. So let's talk about the movie and my thoughts on it. First and foremost, I have been very critical of the leaks as I covered them, but I still went into this movie wanting to like it and kind of knowing what I was in for. This movie is getting skewered by a lot of critics, but the ones that have been skewering it, many of them love The Last Jedi, and I did not like The Last Jedi. So the one thing I want to talk about here real quick is, one of my big criticisms of The Last Jedi was that it kind of insulted you in a passive-aggressive way for being a Star Wars fan. The movie made you feel like you were a dunce if you were a Star Wars fan with the way that Rian Johnson had written it. Yes, it did kind of do something different with Luke, but I felt like what they did with Luke had a lot of glaring errors compared to who the character of Luke Skywalker was for the past 40 years or so, 42 years. And the movie just made you hit you over the head over and over again that being a Star Wars fan is not cool, and that, it's just very nihilistic film. With The Rise of Skywalker, though, it's actually the complete opposite. There is no question in my mind that Abrams loves Star Wars. Whether or not you like this movie or Force Awakens, the dude is a genuine, he does love Star Wars, and I think he loves it more than Rian Johnson, the classic trilogy and whatnot. So with this movie, he tries his best to kind of reward you for being a Star Wars fan and for investing yourself in the previous 8 films. But the question is, of course, did he do a good job? Now, the big topic of discussion that has come about over and over again is fan service and, the whole fan service aspect of this, And in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with fan service, especially for the conclusion of a saga. Like with Endgame, for example, there's tons of fan service in that movie. There's nothing wrong with that at all, especially referencing the previous parts of the story, like Endgame, which we are going to make some comparisons here. There's nothing wrong with that just by itself, but the question is, it depends on how it's executed. And let me tell you something right now. This movie, as far as fan service goes, no, it's beyond fan service. This movie is fan fellatio. That's what I'm going to call it. In other words, I'm trying to be clean here, but I'm not going to be clean in this review, dude. This movie feels like, let me give you the quote of the review here, all right? Here is the quote of the review. Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker is like getting a blowjob from a very pretty girl who doesn't know what she's doing. It's like putting your penis in a jar of marbles, in that you like a little bit of it, some of it feels good, but at the end of the day, you kind of go home unsatisfied. And that's kind of how I felt with this movie, in that it does wrap up this trilogy, but does it wrap up the entire 9-episode Star Wars saga in a good way? I would say not, in my opinion. No, I don't think it did at all. Now, yes, those were some big shoes to fill, because we're talking about, 8 movies that have spanned 42 years, and, there's a lot of stuff going on, but no, this does not end the Skywalker saga in a good way. In fact, in many ways, and this is one thing that's really hard to talk about with this movie, it's a very difficult film to review and think about. In many ways, this movie, while it tries to, there's a lot of push and pull here. It tries to honor the previous films, the prequels, the original trilogy, the last 2, sequel trilogy films, while at the same time disrespecting them. Like, this movie has a lot of disrespect for the Skywalker family and for the story that George Lucas wrote. There are retcons in every Star Wars movie. There's retcons in every single Star Wars movie. In the first 6 minutes of The Rise of Skywalker, the entire saga is retconned. I'm talking about the prequels and the original trilogy with one little retcon. And as the film progresses, there's more and more retcons. And what do I mean by that? Well, Palpatine not only being alive, which completely kills the prophecy of the Chosen One, but also the fact that he is, the way they explain him being alive is just really, really lazy, if you ask me. That's just my opinion on that. But of course, he is in this film, not a spoiler. But what kind of surprises me is this movie. So when I thought about Episode 9 as a kid, right, when I was a little kid and I watched Star Wars, little kid, before the prequels even came out, I always envisioned Star Wars Episode 7, 8, and 9 being this grand epic space opera sequel to Return of the Jedi. And a lot of the stuff that I pictured when I was a kid was in this movie. There were things like the space battle, for example, in this film is gigantic. Like, these are the kind of things that I was expecting from Episode 7, 8, and 9. Like this grand, gigantic, maybe even, I don't want to say Michael Bay, but really extreme level of, epicness, giganticness, you know what I mean? And the movie gave us that, but there were things in this movie that I was totally not expecting as a kid, and that, it's not about expectations with these things, even though everybody has them. It's about, I want to sit down and I want to go on a ride, and I want to be told a good story. And they definitely, you're definitely on a ride in this movie, but there are really weird things about this film, unusual things. First of all, everybody's been saying that this is, 2 movies crammed into one. Actually, it feels more like 3 movies crammed into one. Now, there is a part halfway through the movie where there's a twist, and at that point, I feel like that was, like, right there, that would have been J.J. Abrams' Episode 8, or at least partially Episode 8 if he had done it, because that right there would have been a great place to end the movie and move on. And to be honest with you, this would have been a lot better if it was 2 movies. They crammed 4.5 hours of material in a 2-hour and 20-minute movie. And what's weird about that is, Revenge of the Sith was like a 3-hour movie crammed into 2 hours and 25 minutes. Revenge of the Sith is nonstop, boom, 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 boom. It's a very fun movie to watch, even though it has flaws, right? With The Rise of Skywalker, it's even more crammed in. And what's weird is, with Avengers Endgame being a 3-hour movie, why was this movie not 3 hours? Why didn't they give Abrams that extra half an hour to really flesh out some of the scenes? Because the problem with the movie is that everything goes so fast that it does require multiple viewings, but it also goes so fast to where things happen and you don't really process them fast enough. Now, even though I went into this movie with knowledge of what happened because of the leaks, the way things happen, the way they actually play out is like a little kid did it. Like, honestly, it feels like a little kid created this movie. And, even from the opening crawl, the way the text is, feels like it was written by a 12-year-old kid, which I did cover in one of my leak videos before. And then as the film goes on, it does come off like fan fiction. And people have said that the previous 2 movies are also fan fiction, but this one's like the most fan fiction-y movie that they've ever done. And the way that the movie sort of is edited together, it's like really fast. Like, it feels like an AMV. It feels like an anime music video from like 1999 in some parts, especially the beginning. So many things happen so fast. And I'm not against those kind of things, because I'd rather that than the movie be boring. But the problem is they cram so much story. And let me tell you this right now, yo. Let me tell you this right now. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. In the public eye, Abrams has been constantly talking about how much he loves The Last Jedi and he loves Rian Johnson and what he did with that movie. Complete bullshit. Also, they've been saying that they had a plan to bring back Palpatine from the beginning and this was all planned out. Bullshit, bro. Complete and utter. You are being lied to. There is absolutely no way you can walk away from this movie if you've seen 7, 8, and 9 in that order, or if you've seen Last Jedi and then this one. There is no way you can leave that movie theater and not think that J.J. Abrams hates The Last Jedi. There are things in this movie where they're taking passive-aggressive shots at The Last Jedi. There are scenes where they're literally making fun of stuff in The Last Jedi, reversing stuff in The Last Jedi. There were so many decisions that Abrams made or that Rian Johnson made that Abrams flipped. And then I'm thinking, okay, does Abrams really hate this, or is he trying to please the fans? See, here's the issue with the movie, is that I think that J.J. Abrams, and I'm going to give him respect, I know what he was trying to do, and I respect what he was trying to do, but he's trying to please way too many masters here, which I feared. I feared this before this movie was even made, after Last Jedi. He has to please Disney. He has to please the Star Wars, the old trilogy fans, the prequel trilogy fans, the Reylo fans, boy, oh boy, the, lots of that here, the people who hated Last Jedi, the ones that liked Last Jedi, so he has to figure out a way to kind of make stuff that happened in Last Jedi count, but the way he made it count was just kind of reversing it, or, bringing in something else to replace it instead of moving off of, bouncing off of that story. I'll go into more detail in my spoiler review whenever I drop it, probably tomorrow, but, it's one of those things where, like, there's no way he didn't hate that movie. I don't believe it. I look me in the eye, brother, and tell me that you hated Rian Johnson, that you liked Rian Johnson's Last Jedi, bro. That's what I feel like telling him. And whether or not you're out there and you like or hate The Last Jedi, Abrams sure as hell didn't like it, because, man, it's just a complete... It was almost like Last Jedi never happened. It really felt like, except for maybe a couple of events like Snoke being killed and, Luke dying and whatnot, you could actually skip The Last Jedi, because this movie, we know it's 1 year later, right? We know it's 1 year after Last Jedi, but boy, do a lot of things happen in this movie. It almost feels like it's its own trilogy. Like, this is like its own story. It has the same characters, but there's nothing really... Like, the way that Last Jedi left us with, like, the Resistance being undermanned and the, Supreme Leader Kylo Ren and all that, in the opening crawl in the first 6 minutes of the movie, it's like there's another movie in between 8 and 9 that we never saw. And you know what they're going to do, right? They're going to put out books and comics and all this type of stuff to, to tell us the story of what happened. And, the Fortnite event told a piece of the story of what happened. You know what I mean? And it's just, I'm tired of that. I'm tired of Disney trying to get me to buy more stuff. I don't want to buy any more of your crap. Tell me a story within 7, 8, and 9, 3 movies. You've had years to tell us a story within 3 movies, and there's just no way that this thing was planned out. And it wasn't. So I'm not crapping on this movie in the non-spoiler. I'm going to go more into detail in the spoiler review. But if you're asking me, whether or not the movie's worth seeing, let me get into some positives, okay? The positives real quick. Special effects are amazing. The movie looks great. J.J. Abrams is great at setting up shots and making things look very epic and huge. And, if you've seen any of his movies, Star Trek, even Mission Impossible 3, he's good at that. So there are, big, epic, gigantic stuff in this film, lightsaber fights and things of that nature. You know what I mean? There's things that he does well, I feel. But the problem with this movie, I feel, is that it makes decisions that I feel are unwarranted, unearned. It disrespects the prequels and the original trilogy and the last 2 while trying to pay homage to them. I don't know if he meant to disrespect them or not, but the way that the movie ends, in my opinion, I know what he was going for, but I feel like it was disrespectful to the Skywalker saga as a whole, and I feel like it was disrespectful to what George Lucas had originally wanted, not just with the prequels, not just with the originals, but with the prequels, because George Lucas has said, this is the saga of Darth Vader. Like, that is what he has said from his words, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This movie kind of ignores that in a way. It sort of disrespects it. And like I said, there's tons of disrespect towards Last Jedi. So if you hated that movie, you're going to have fun with that. But remember, just because you hated Last Jedi does not mean that you're going to like this movie. And that's one thing I want to say right now, dude. We have to talk about this now because people are starting to irritate me about this. The problems with The Rise of Skywalker have a little bit to do with Last Jedi, but not everything. We can sit here and blame Rian Johnson for what he did to the saga in his movie. Yes, we can, and he definitely did damage, no matter which way you slice it, with The Last Jedi to the fandom and to the Star Wars sequel trilogy. But this could have been a lot better, especially if they had given him that 3-hour time. I don't know why they didn't do that. Like, that's so weird to me. You would have been able to flesh this out more, but he's trying to cram in so much that, and there's deleted scenes too. I can't even imagine how much is there. Like the scene with the Oracle that was leaked. That's not in the movie. It's not really a spoiler. It's not in the movie, but that's going to be on the cutting room floor, and we know for a fact that that got shot because we saw models of it in the behind the scenes featurette. So there's things that are not in the movie that are also would make the movie even longer. Which I'm all right with them cutting stuff, but This feels like a roller coaster, but not like a good kind of roller coaster, more like a nauseating type of roller coaster with how fast things are. And again, I don't like the decisions that were made with the characters, and I don't like the way he chose to end the saga. Again, this movie works as the end of the sequel trilogy, if you want to call it that, but it's still, at the end of the day, this trilogy is going to come off very, very disjointed. There was no direction, and you had two different directors that had completely different visions for Star Wars and for storytelling. And whether or not you like Abrams more than Rian Johnson or vice versa, doesn't matter to me. They should not work together anymore, ever again, because they don't have any chemistry when it comes to, or synergy. That's the word, synergy. There's just no synergy here. And at the end of the day, I think that the sequel trilogy is going to be a disappointment at the end of the day. I feel like in years we're going to look back on it, and maybe we'll like aspects of it, but I feel like, it's going to end up being a big letdown. Now, I am going to do not only a spoiler review for this, but also I'm going to bring some guests onto the channel to discuss the film, some of your favorite Star Wars YouTubers, and some other people. We're going to have discussions on this movie forever, for the next few weeks, months, because there's a lot to talk about, a lot to unpack. So, do I recommend Rise of Skywalker? That is a tough question. Honestly, for the visuals alone, I would say, yeah, go for it. If you're already invested in this saga, I say, yeah, go for it. Movie tickets are not that expensive, but set your expectations low and don't in any way think that this is a satisfying conclusion to the entire saga. And also, what people were saying about how, John Connor, what they did with him in Terminator Dark Fate was disrespectful to Terminator. There's a lot of that in this movie, yo. There's also a lot of callbacks to previous movies all over this, right? Which I expected, but it's almost like it's too much. Like I said, it's almost like he gave you too much. And to me, it could have been scaled back a bit. But like I said, I'll go into more detail in the spoiler review. Overall, I don't hate this movie, dude. I really don't hate it like other people do, but it is a big disappointment. It's a big letdown. Part of that is Last Jedi's fault, right? At the same time, though, they could have scrapped something way better than this, and it just feels so... it just feels weird. It's a weird feeling movie. You walk out of it feeling just empty and unsatisfied, and that's not a good thing, and that's how I felt with Last Jedi, There were things this movie did better than Last Jedi, and there were things this movie did worse than Last Jedi. So I'm keeping it as spoiler-free as possible. Those are my thoughts. Spoiler review is coming. Streams. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff here. Go see the movie as soon as you can if you care about spoilers. But honestly, it's just... I wanted the Return of the King. I wanted Lord of the Rings Return of the King. And instead I got, crotch rot. So anyways, that's it. We'll talk soon. We'll talk a lot more about this in the future.